Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So, this evening, the distinguished Tom Norman is with us. How you doing, Tom?
Good, and how are you there, Kevin?
I am well. Welcome in, TG. Howdy, Anders. Good to see you, folks. I see some other folks who are hiding away in lurk mode. Welcome in as well. So tonight for Shop Talk, figured, you know what? Past Summit was last week. We're probably going to spend a good amount of time talking about the past Summit that just happened. The first, first is definitely an adjective you can use. Past virtual summit, and kind of get some thoughts. Um, Mala, unfortunately, not able to make it tonight, nor Tracy. So I did get Mala's thoughts. She put out a great blog post, so I'm going to crib from that for her thoughts. And speaking of Tracy, I do have to point out that Tracy won the Passion Award for volunteer in the past community. So congratulations to Tracy. She'll be here for the next edition of Shop Talk in 2 weeks. Also, you can note that Tracy has fall hair. So with that, let's talk. Let's talk Summit. Yeah, let's talk Summit. I was going to talk about TriPass board and election announcements, but let's do that at the end. So past Summit this past week, I did a pre-con on Monday. I did a presentation on Thursday. To be honest, those were about the only Summit related things that I did this year. I was really busy, had a lot of other stuff going on at the same time, so didn't really have enough time to dig into a conference. And it's a difficulty about virtual conferences. Like the first one you're at, you say, "Hey, I can sit back and watch all this extra content and, get a lot more out of the sessions because I'm not as exhausted trying to get from place to place." By about the fifth, thinking, well, it's just another day. I'm in the same room where I normally work, where I normally do other stuff. So I could say stay caught up on my work and other stuff, or I could watch this thing. And at some point, that cost benefit calculus ends up saying, well, maybe not this time. That was my experience. Hopefully, a lot of people had much better experiences with Summit this year. I will say, pre-con went well. Main session went pretty well. I did have, as always, I needed about 5 minutes at the end. So, uh, nope. So that's a. I'm not sure exactly what the context is, TG, for nope, but I'm pretty sure it's correct. Um, so main session, about 5 minutes extra would have been great, but that's because I tend to, like a vacuum, fill in any available space when it comes to speaking. Tom, you had a different experience because your sessions were pre-recorded versus the live session that I did.
Correct, they were, um, which made it very interesting. You basically listened to yourself, as you were listening to the conference, and you were, answering the questions in the question pane, discussion pane. Um, the interesting part is, and maybe it was my lack of knowledge or I didn't catch something or whatever. I never could figure out how to answer the questions in the question pane. I would have to copy them and put them in the discussion pane and then answer them for people. Um, the attendance was pretty good, more than what I thought would be in the sessions, and I thought the chat after the sessions, not only the ones that came to my chat as we discussed the topics I was presenting on, I thought that went very well, and I actually went to a couple chats, and it was in fact I gained some very probably better information in the chats, uh, because like I was telling you, Kevin, it wasn't, even though it was only supposed to be 15 minutes, both my chats lasted longer than 15 minutes. The first one, we were at the end of the day, so I was just like going, I have nothing to do better than, I'll just sit here and answer your questions all day long. So
Sure.
I did not go to any, I did go to two keynotes on the Wednesday and Thursday. I kind of like watching those better because I was able to get up and walk around and go, because they were right during lunchtime here. So I was able to get up and go get lunch and listen to them, and not necessarily have to sit there and listen to them go on. So I kind of like that a little bit better because I was able to get and walk around with it. But past those, I really didn't attend anything else. I didn't, I almost feel bad for the sponsors, because if they were like, people were like I was, then the sponsors probably got hardly no one in there. Of course, they were giving away some nice stuff, so maybe they did get people and stuff. So
Yeah, that could be. That could be. Saw Andy Warren talking about some of the sponsor setup. He had a slew of posts, a whole series of them. Let me just drop a link to Andy's website so that you can check out all of those. Andy's been very invested in the community for quite a while, and interesting to see his thoughts on the virtual summit. So going through chat, Andrew says, felt much the same. The 3 days off from work were sunny out. It was a nice break. So not necessarily that focused on attending sessions. I mean, it happens. And to be fair, even in person at Summit, you don't necessarily go to a huge number of sessions every year. Because you're spending time catching up with those people that you haven't seen in 11 months. So I get that. TG says, the problem I had with the pre-recording is every user started the video at a different time, and therefore questions were all over the place. That's a little interesting.
that was true. That was true.
Okay.
Yeah, they could basically start the recording whenever they wanted to start the recording. So it wasn't like it was, okay, we're all starting right now. It was like you start 2 minutes later than someone else and stuff. So
Right.
that made it a little difficult.
Yeah,
And the other thing I failed to mention, Kevin, that we talked about for a moment, what I found really annoying was with the software is that you could not full screen the presentation. You had that 1/3 of a screen that was being taken up by the discussion and discussion question answers, and you could not minimize it or push it to the side or anything like that. So
right, which meant that it's a little bit harder to see, especially if you don't have a giant monitor right in front of you.
yeah, and like I was telling you, as far as the speakers go, we were not told that we were only going to have 1/3 of a screen and you need to zoom it and everything else. The thought was, okay, I'm gonna have a full screen, so I don't need to do all the zoom and all that kind of stuff. So
Sounds like the spread in some of those sessions was about 45 minutes. See, I thought it would be something along the lines of SQL Bits, where essentially they started the recording for everybody and it just ran during that time slot. That was the Bits experience. Now, I guess the Summit experience, I did see Andy mention that you could pause sessions. So you could pause it and start it and back up whenever you wanted. But if you're gonna have discussion and Q&A, yeah, that's in Anders' words, nuts. That is a little weird. Marshall mentioned something that Tom also talked about before stream. I saw someone mention if you extracted the MP4 URL from the web page, you could get a full screen view. Yeah, so the MP4s were available.
come on, Kevin, say it.
I'm not
Say it.
going to connect those two dots. However, TG did.
However, TG did connect the dots for you.
He connected the dots immediately.
Yeah.
So that's why he'd be in chat.
Yeah.
That way you'll be able to see what he said. Speaking of Marshall, also found it way too easy to get distracted away into something else that was happening. Try to insulate others so they could attend as many sessions as possible. Right. That's another thing where, again, even when you're at a conference, because of the weird circumstances, it just still feels like another day in the office. Because you're still in the same office, you're still in the same place. People still know how to contact you, and you don't even have the excuse of, "Oh, I silenced my phone because of the meeting because I was
Well,
in a session."
well, you know, our my boss and my coworker went also, so there was two of us there technically, and we actually were able to put Zoom on, no notifications, that we were away, and all that kind of stuff. And basically, they left us alone, so we had total freedom to actually listen to the sessions and stuff. And like I said, I listened to some good ones. Bob Ward pulled out the debugger if you missed it, so you might want to go back and watch his on locks, weights, and spin locks.
Hmm.
So he pulled the debugger out on us.
Nice, nice. It's fun to see something like that, like when Paul White does it, or when Bob does it, or you get someone who knows how to use the debugger using it, as opposed to me. Downloaded sessions, yeah, okay. So a lot of people have the recordings. Are the downloaded sessions allowed to be shared? No, no, they're definitely not. Um, they they weren't
They're not
intended to be
supposed
freely
to be,
available.
yeah, they're not supposed to be shared, but I'm sure they're going to be.
Yeah, I mean that's part of that was kind of past revenue stream of providing access to
Well,
the session.
well, they're not doing a USB or whatever this year to basically, if you didn't have a chance to, or at least they haven't announced that they're doing like a USB. Here's all the sessions, you can get them on the a USB for people
Yeah,
that
I think
couldn't
it's
attend.
virtual only.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. I've liked having the USB sticks just because most of the time when I want to watch a session, it'll be, oh, I'm on an airplane, got an hour, good time to do that. And
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
although I guess I could,
Except you're not on a plane anymore, Kevin. So
that is true. Except I'm not on planes anymore. I can pretend to be on an airplane, sit in a chair with like another chair right in front of me, and have my wife give me a packet of peanuts 45 minutes into the flight. The flight.
yeah, get you some roaring noise in the background.
Yeah, yeah, that'll work. That'll work. It'll give me that feeling. Could save the MP4s to a USB stick. There, that's the way to think. And then I'm not even gonna say it aloud. Not gonna say it aloud. First class ticket to Mexico next month. Seat A1. A1 is a pretty good seat. I mean, I like the fact that it's first row. I generally am fine with first row, except on something small like a CRJ 200 or one of the smaller Imbra Airs, where the first row you have to put your bags in the third or fourth row.
Do they
Uh,
even are they even flying those small planes anymore? I thought several of those have gone out of business.
yeah, actually, yeah. Air Wisconsin, I think, was either going bankrupt or had. Sorry, I'm thinking 1A, not A1. Um, so yeah, 1A, like front seat window. Um, pretty nice. Marshall prefers rows 2 to 4 for overhead and under seat. I get that. If that's available, I want an aisle seat, probably about second or third row back. Uh, I'm fine with bulkhead, especially if it's economy class. I'd rather have the leg room. Um, I'd rather not have somebody leaning back in front of me. So 42H for Anders. I think that's the one where you can hear the engine best, right? Am I right?
I think so.
Uh, no. Oh, so that's not the one where you hear the engine best. It's closest to the
So did
restroom.
so did anyone in our group actually go to any of the non-session, non-keynote stuff? Did you go visit the vendors? Did you go to Birds of a Feather or any of the after type of stuff? Or did you just kind of everybody else blow it off too?
Well, I know that Mala and Tracy both hosted Birds of a Feather sessions.
They were
So
begging people though on Twitter to come join them. They were trying to get me to come join them.
Andrew says Birds of a Feather Power BI was pretty neat.
Oh, was it? Cool.
Yeah. So was it you folks talk a lot about content, or is it just chatting with people in the industry? I'm curious about that. Normally, the Birds of a Feather. Oh, talking problems. Okay. Yeah, I could see this sort of scenario working out really well for that kind of small group problem solving discussion. You can only get one problem at a time, but I could see getting that feeling of, well, hey, we're all here. You got a problem? Let's talk about it. And I don't have to worry about can I hear the person over at the other end of the table.
Yeah, it would make that scenario much, much better.
Right. Marshall went to a handful of vendor presentations, so there were some of those this year as well. I got to see Rohan's setup, his studio setup. That was pretty interesting.
So let's ask this question, Kevin, to the crowd. What was your favorite session or part of Virtual Summit 2020? If you had a favorite, one thing, one item, what would that be?
Good question. While they're going, what's your answer, Tom?
My answer, I think, would be going back to Bob Ward's session. Yeah, is latch, weights, and spin locks. I thought he did a phenomenal job on explaining what those were, even to the point that the DBA that went with me from my company that is very, very new to SQL Server, it would explain it. He could understand it. And even though Bob listed it as a 400 class, but of course, pulling out the debugger might have shocked him or whatever. But so Anders, what's your favorite? What do you say?
Anders, I'm pretty sure didn't go to Summit this year. I know he was talking about wanting to do it in person. Yeah, Anders canceled. That's what I thought. Marshall
Yeah.
says Hugo's normalization talk. Hugo Cornelis does a fantastic job speaking and presenting in general. That is a session that I probably will catch on uh, a later viewing.
Did
Grab
he
one of the
do
recordings.
did he do more than one session, Hugo? Do you remember?
He did a pre-con. He might have done a second session as well, but I'm not positive. I know that his session was at the same time as my session, so I wasn't able to watch it live, but that I immediately saw it and said, "Oh, that's a topic which is sadly under discussed." And um, as mentioned here in chat, normalization is that thing you do at job interviews. I mean, yeah, that's the unfortunate problem that people forget about it after the job interview, and you end up with, well, real life problems.
Or you
Um,
let Entity Framework do your stuff for you, and then you really end up with problems.
Andrew says videos on a couple of things I've been pressured in at work but haven't had time to learn. The session on CDM was a good intro.
CDM being
The common data model for Microsoft Power BI.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it's so who did that CDM session? Um, I know a couple of people have gotten into the topic a bit, so I'm kind of curious who was the presenter there, if you remember. Let's see if I'm skipping anything else. So the secret answer for Y42H is that on an Airbus 340, that's when you go from 242 to 232 seats. So there you go. I don't think I've ever flown on a 340 before.
That's a big aircraft.
Yeah, all of my international has typically been on Boeing.
Yeah, Boeing 777 or
777
more.
or 87s. I did a 67 to Barcelona.
67 would be a small plane to be on
Or sorry, it was to
that
Madrid.
far.
67 to Madrid. Yeah, it was a small plane.
Yeah.
Would not do again. Same on
That may
330, 300s. Okay.
that may be all you're going to be flying on to Europe for a little while.
So 767 is one of the best economy passenger planes. It depends on which seats you get. 232 seating all over. Yeah, but you know what? There's at least one airline that I can talk about that packs those seats. As in
Uh,
they cram you in tight.
they are all starting to pack the seats. Have you heard that? There's no more open seating or open seats.
Oh, that's the middle seat. Yeah, they're that in reality they weren't doing that very much anyhow. But I mean that the pitch is really tight on some airlines.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like historically, Lufthansa and Austrian tended to have pretty good pitch. You'd have a few extra inches, but the some of the budget airlines, you talk about the Ryanairs of the world, they will put those seats as close to each other as you can, and several of the European airlines tend to be a little tighter than U.S. airlines,
We
especially for
flew
international.
we flew Virgin Atlantic to Manchester, and what was that aircraft going over? Anyway, when we sat down, I think it was a 747. When we sat down, we were in coach, of course, and we couldn't even bend down to put our bag underneath because it was so close.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, I've been in cases like that. And if you're doing that for 2 hours, that's a little bit of a stretch. If you're doing it for 6 hours, nah, hard pass.
8 to 9 hours, try that one.
Yep, I'm done. I will pay extra for business class for that one.
Oh, had no
It's all a
clue.
matter.
Had no clue is that gonna be that close.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's you got to do research because not all airlines are the same. So
Yeah.
figuring out which airline and their seating configuration, a 333 versus a 343 or a 252 on the layouts makes a big difference. That is true.
Yep.
And even if they tell you it's a 333, um, there can be still a couple inches difference when you're talking seat width versus the pitch, the amount of legroom that you're going to get. Um, they'll be pretty big. Newark to Singapore, 16 hours nonstop. Yeah, if I do that, I'm doing that in business class. More than 4 hours and it's business. I fully agree with that. I'm at a point in life where I am happy not to sit and coach for long flights. Done it on red eyes, done it on international flights when I was younger and didn't have the money to do anything else. And I'm okay with not doing that anymore. You guys must be rich. Anders, Anders, come on. Cheapest
No,
seat on the most fun planes.
mine is now called non-rev, and I basically hopefully can get up front for free.
There you go.
You got to get your son or daughter or your child to go work for the airline or your
Yeah, or
wife.
or a parent, as some of us in chat would know.
Yeah.
Um, or have a bunch of points and miles to use. Those also help.
Yes, they do.
RDU Quebec, Montreal to Berlin to Oslo. Uh, Business, definitely business.
If you could do it,
Yep.
yes.
So writing all of that off on taxes as well because it's business. It's a business trip.
Well, yeah, if you're going to speak to a SQL Saturday or a group or whatever, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Not just because it's business class. Please, IRS. Those were all legitimate. So let me talk about some of the stuff that Mala mentioned in her blog post about the topic. I will drop a link in chat as well for that because here we are. fly BA and go first class. I can afford business class. I can't afford first class. I can afford business class and then get upgrades to first class occasionally. But usually it's like I pay for premium. Oh, premium economy. So international premium economy, I'm also okay with. Did that to Australia and from LA to Sydney. I'm fine with that. I mean, that's essentially business class domestic. So wide enough seats, you get a bulkhead, you can kind of lean back a bit, and it's not as nice as business class, but it's still a lot better than coach. Used miles for BA first one time. It was a fun experience. Yeah, so I might have to do that, especially international. I mean, it's a totally different experience when you're talking British Airways domestic, where you're flying from London to I don't know to Dublin or London to Manchester. Yes, I know that Dublin is international technically, but intra Europe is a bit of a different story. At that point, you're basically flying uh, Columbus to Raleigh, maybe. It's probably even less than that distance wise. Okay, Mala. So she has always enjoyed going to Pass Summit, and it's difficult not being there in person. Uh, but she does talk about the pre-cons that she did. PowerShell with Rob Sewell on day one, and Hugo actually did his execution plan deep dive on day two. So yeah, he did do a pre-con. What was interesting about the way the pre-cons were set up is that in a lot of the cases, basically it was you'll start on some time. That sounds silly when I say it out loud, but it's one time live. So for example, I did my pre-con, I started 9 a.m. Eastern time. And that was, I figured, good enough for West Coast folks, good enough for European folks. As you get closer to Central Eastern Europe, it's going to be a stretch for them. But I would end, it'd be about 11, 12 o'clock their time, 11 p.m., 12 a.m. So not the worst.
My
Really good for
pre-con,
people in the
my
middle of the
pre-con
ocean.
was 12 to 9,
Yeah.
noon to 9 p.m.
Yes. So some people like Hugo actually did theirs at weird hours so that they could get the US audience. And other people said, "You know what? I'm over here in Europe. I'll just present on European time." And uh, there was the possibility for some people of recording the pre-con and having it for 72 hours. That was a little weird, that whole situation with the recordings. I had no problem with, hey, go ahead, record my session for 72 hours, I guess, unless it was made publicly available to the world. Then I'd have a little bit of a problem. Because that was the whole point, that it wasn't supposed to be publicly made available. But hopefully not. The tricky part is, you say, okay, well, pre-con on Monday, I couldn't get the timing for it down right because I'm in India and the person's presenting in the East Coast of the US. So sounded like they were getting notifications sometime maybe Tuesday or Wednesday that, these pre-cons are now available to view and you have until Thursday night. So I'm not sure what the exact details were on that. I do know that 72 hours was in the speaker contract, and hopefully everybody who paid for a pre-con to watch a pre-con and couldn't watch it in reasonable hours because it was delivered at really weird times, hopefully they were able to get that time to watch it, because otherwise that's a lot of money for not being able to get anything.
Well, it was, yeah, when you're talking about 8 hours of listening and you've got the regular conference going on at the same time, seems like that would have been very difficult to try to sneak in those hours. It'd been different if they would have said, okay, the 72 hours start today and you're done Wednesday or whatever, then you would have maybe time outside your job or something, or over the
Yeah, or like
weekend.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday or something. Saturday,
Yeah.
Sunday, Monday. Um, but yeah, that was well, actually Molly even brought it up here that how are you going to find time to rewatch or even watch for a first time 6 hours of content? A little tough. And I don't know that there were any really good solutions, but it seems like this for the people who said nope, do not record. Essentially you're saying this is my time. If you can't make it at that time, that's okay. Just you won't be able to watch it. Um, for the people who did say yeah, go ahead and record, like that experience, I don't think was fantastic based on what I'm hearing. So, Tracy did win the Passion Award, as I mentioned. I'm gonna just switch over to this again for anybody who hasn't seen it. Tracy is a volunteer winner of awards, winner of volunteer awards, and we'll have her back on in a couple of weeks, and I'll probably razz her just a little bit about that. And Mala did moderate a Birds of a Feather bubble on mentoring. So there were a few people who showed up to it. I did kind of figure that a lot of the social events probably weren't going to get a lot of attention because it's not the same when you're online.
No, it's not at all.
And there are several reasons for it, not just because, you're all people coming out of a box as opposed to actual people. Is Tracy still scheduled to present tomorrow? Yes, she is. So she's had a recurring conflict on Mondays for the past couple of months. Those conflicts actually, this is the last week of conflict. So our next episode of Shop Talk, she's back to being available on Mondays. She will be presenting tomorrow. So yes, please do come in on Tuesday and congratulate and or razz Tracy about her award. Maybe she'll be able to show it on camera for you. Mala did visit the vendor rooms and tried to make sure that she thanked the sponsors and tried to help them along and give them reason to invest that marketing money. But it sounded like maybe they didn't have people online for everything, so there weren't always people available. Which even when you were in person, you go to some of the vendor booths, there wasn't always somebody there. So that's kind of a okay feeling. You want to say hey thanks, and you'd hope that that online experience meant that there would be somebody there. But for a lot of the smaller sponsors, may not have had somebody all the time. Kind of okay.
Well, they didn't have like, at Summit, if you remember that in the live one, they would have the kind of hors d'oeuvres, et cetera, one of the nights, and basically people would wander through at that time. Well, they didn't really have anything similar, or that I noticed that they would announce and say, okay, here's the vendor hour,
Right.
come on through. Might have been even, come on through for a chance for pop-up prizes or whatever, to help basically bring people into the experience at a certain hour. They had it throughout the day and stuff, but nothing kind of concentrated
Okay.
that I saw. Maybe I missed it.
Right. Yeah, that's quite possible. Marshall says that's why he made an effort to go by all the vendor booths, check out what they had, see if there's anything that might be of interest. Yeah, yeah. Hey, I'm all for trying to get sponsors to say yes, I will continue to give money for events. Um, a nice pen. Yeah, bring it home. Good swag is always good part of a conference.
Hey, I always brought home at least two or three t-shirts and stuff, that would last me for about another year.
Oh yeah, I probably still have a couple of the SQL Server 2019 shirts to give away. I would not be shocked if I had a couple of them in a box someplace, but we just stopped having in-person events. So, of course, I'm going to have a box full of stuff that I literally cannot give away.
I need a medium, Kevin. I lost all that weight. All my shirts were XLs.
Hmm. I there, there's a chance I might actually have a medium.
Yeah.
Positives: platform was relatively easy to navigate. Says Mala. The chat rooms and classes were a lot of fun. The Pass HQ and board of directors members were regularly available. So, that's something that is kind of hard to do during Summit because that's also the time when they're all together and spending so much time in behind closed rooms trying to work out the all the details. So I could see that being a little bit of a difference this year. Replaying sessions was good. Um, and having recordings available immediately was great. Apparently, immediately for everybody.
I thought it was like you couldn't get it till a day later, but that's
Um,
basically immediate anyway.
Compared to the USB stick era, yeah. At that point, you were
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
what, January, late December, early January, maybe. By the time you got the USB sticks.
Right. Yep.
On the negative side, Mala mentions that she's not sure how vendors could actually get anything out of this event. Traffic in vendor rooms was kind of low. The transcribing and subtitling. Did you try watching anything in subtitles, Tom?
It was horrible, in my opinion. I watched some of it, and boy, they couldn't translate. Um, SQL, they actually spelled SEQUEL. One of them, there were just different things that, if they weren't technical, they weren't getting it right.
Yeah, it was most likely auto translation from a service.
Yeah, I actually, most of mine, I had to turn it off because it was distracting, which you could do, which was good.
Yeah, just imagine how bad it got for a German accent. Oh, I could imagine. And Marshall also says depends on the accent of the person, but there were plenty of times got a good laugh out of the subtitles. One of my favorite cases of this was a sequel Saturday that Alberto Ferrari presented at, and he would be talking about something, and you just look at the transcription that's showing up on the screen behind him, and you're like, how did that turn into that? Unfortunately, I don't remember any of the bits, but I do remember like having to keep from cracking up a couple of times because it ended up being uh, a couple of words came out that got translated to swear words. There were a couple of phrases that um, were just completely off the wall, and I was there hearing him say things that were positively anodyne. Uh, but that transcription was fun.
They must have had a machine do it because my second session, I didn't turn it in till a week before
Hmm.
Pass was live. So they must have had a machine doing it.
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't going to be live transcriptions from people typing. It's
Yeah.
going to be it's going to be like an Azure Cognitive Services or whatever. Um, Mike mentions I was on a Google meeting and real time closed captions for 3 speakers, nearly instant, near 100% correct. Yeah, so Google Chat does good closed captioning. Microsoft Teams often does good captioning. You can turn on live captions in there, and a lot of the time it'll work pretty well. There are certain accents that it does a terrible job with, but most of them, petabyte for petabyte. There you go. Most of the time, Teams does a pretty decent job. And what is interesting is watching it correct itself. So, for example, you may see it may correct the form of there based off of the next couple of words that show up when you realize that, oh, it's not that form of there. And just watching it in real time, it's fun. It's fun to watch. It sometimes works well. Other times feels like, yeah, it's got no idea what's going on. Um, but at the same time, I've had cases where the audio was nearly unhearable. That the person's microphone was down so low, but closed caption was good enough that I could understand what they were saying based off of the transcript. Google does correcting. That's a downside. I thought it can be sometimes. In a live situation, if the person is speaking fast enough, yes. If the say the transcription system gets a little bit behind, or if it shows too many lines and it's trying to recorrect so many things. In the Teams case, they show 2 to 3 lines of text, which means that even if it does change a line, it's only changing something within the last few words. So it's not going back a sentence and changing things at that point. Pre-cons were not worth it with the replay option gone in such a short time. I can understand that.
Well, and I really didn't get printouts, that, normally you get this booklet that you can kind of follow through. I got several of them up in my cabinet and stuff. And of course, I haven't, those were always handy.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the pre-con, where you can just sit there and scribble in notes throughout the course of the day and go back to it afterwards and have some idea of what you were doing. I've got those going back to 2013.
Yeah, I've got them pretty far back too.
So some of the transcription items were changed just to disappear. That I don't like. If you're gonna disappear a word because someone said a bad word, live with it. It's live.
Yeah.
Blue language appears live. This isn't network television. So finding individuals to chat up was insanely hard, especially for people not on social media. I could also see that. If your only way of interacting with somebody is messaging on a platform and they're not responding to the message on the platform for any reason, not like, oh, I can walk over and look and see, hey, there's Tom over there talking to a few other people. Let me just walk over and say hi to Tom. Feels more like kind of have to see that the person is there, or actively go looking for a person, as opposed to just finding a person, which again is part of the fun of in-person conferences, where I don't necessarily have to seek out Tom. I'll just find him at some point and say hello. So those were Mala's thoughts. We did talk a little bit about, actually we did talk about all of this, the software, the maximizing screen, the zooming in. On the opposite side, on the speaker side, because I did live sessions, they were on Zoom. I was pretty impressed with the way that they had a moderator. So not only a moderator, but also a technician, which a lot of conferences, you're not going to be able to afford having technicians in rooms. So there was somebody who was there to make sure that audio checks were good, to make sure that everything was showing up appropriately, to be able to handle those last second issues that you might have with sharing screen or with handling demos. And that person kind of acting as the intermediary, the broadcast technician, essentially. So that was an experience that I haven't had in online meetings, and it was interesting. I also kind of wonder how much it cost to have that, but I took advantage of it. Now, on the other side, because I was in a Zoom meeting, I was kind of isolated away from everybody. It's sort of like when someone presents for TriPass, they don't get to see Twitch chat. So I have to be the conduit between chat and the speaker. So I was in that situation where I saw Zoom chat and I could hear the moderator, but I wasn't going to be able to see actual chat at the time. And it sounded like I was at about a 45 to 60-second delay between when a word came out of my mouth and when it was expected to show up over on the other end. That delay is a bit high. I mean, for us right now, I'm looking down at the stats and I don't know why because I can't tell you anything from that, but we're probably at about a 15 to 20-second delay between word comes out of my mouth and it shows up on your screen. Sometimes we're a bit faster than that, but Twitch has about a 7 to 10-second buffer, and then there's a few seconds extra for non-partnered streams. We're on lower tier, so normally it doesn't really matter. I mean, we're not going for real time generally, and we're at a point where I can follow along with chat and understand what the conversation's about usually. But that experience when you start talking about 45-second or 60-second delays means that I wasn't even going to be able to benefit from watching myself on the stream, on the actual stream. It just would have been a distraction because, oh, look, there's me a minute ago. And although I could have caught Q&A in there, I think the moderators did a pretty good job overall. So Mike says, I love Silicon Labs webinars. They bring engineers in to assist the speaker answering real-time questions while the speaker is talking. That is nice to have if you do have someone. There's a bit of debate on that. And the debate is essentially, if you're talking about, say, here's a product team, and everybody's on that product team, and you have one person from the product team presenting, and then you have other members of the product team who are answering questions while that's going on, that's fine by me. If you have one person who's presenting just kind of solo, and you have other people who are trying to answer questions at the same time, there can be some philosophical differences, and they can be meaningful. Where I may have an answer and Tom may have an answer, and if I'm presenting, I may deliver an answer one way. If Tom answers the question, and it was a big enough question that was worth pushing along, there could be some potential difference in explanation. Yes, it was the same product team. Okay, so that goes back to, I think that's a pretty solid thing to do, because then you don't necessarily have to have that speaker stop and talk about the questions, but do leave some questions for the speaker. Yeah, got to give them something to do. Let them know that people were actually paying attention. So I do know that there are some people where if there were other folks trying to answer those questions, they wouldn't necessarily like it so much. And there are some folks who wouldn't be too concerned as long as the answers are right. So that's something where if you do it, have good reasons, have a good situation, and make sure that's known in advance, I think. And again, if it's all people from the same product team like you're talking about, that's a pretty obvious case for, that makes sense. Even if that's the team lead up there and the other product team members, well, they're going to generally be on the same page. So any other thoughts on Past Summit from chat, from Tom?
Nothing else from me, Kevin.
We've wrapped up past Summit for this year. I don't have to announce that Summit's upcoming. We'll see about next year. I'm sure there will be a lot up in the air for a couple of reasons. So we'll see what happens. Also, it'll be interesting to see some of the after action reports from other folks. Like I saw Andy has that long series. I saw Mala's blog post. Are there not even dates? Are there dates for 2021?
No, there's not.
Okay. Yeah, because normally they announce the dates during Summit, and then you can sign up until December to get the best price. But I could see that. I could see there being a few reasons why there may not be dates
You can
because
you can tell them.
well, I mean, one of them is simply, well, are we going to be able to present in person or will it be virtual again? Uh, is there a contract? Marshall mentions normally you announce the dates because you have a contract already in place, and that's true. This year was going to be in Houston. Andrew says, will there be a pass next year? That's
There you
that's another part of
go.
it. Yeah.
Andrew said it.
Anders says things so I don't have to. That's the way this
Well,
relationship works.
and that's the whole thing is they may have when they pulled out of this one, they may have even pulled out of the ones in the future, knowing, especially after they did the financial budget and it's several $1 million in the hole.
Yeah, 1.5 million.
Yeah, it's 1.59 million in the hole, and I was telling Kevin I had read, I thought that we had 1.2 million in the bank, so there's a massive gap there.
That's yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting year. There are board of directors elections coming up, and that might make a difference. I don't know. Because that's I don't think it's the I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I have a good enough opinion that I can wing it. So
Uh,
I'll probably keep mostly quiet on that, except to say I
I
think it's more structural than personal.
I think they're going to have to do some firing to survive.
Some more, yeah.
Well, I'm even thinking that they're going to have to get rid of the company as a whole. So for us to be able to be able to even survive.
No, that is one possibility. And like I said, I don't have a strong enough opinion on the matter to go too far out into the waters on that.
Come on, Kevin.
Which company are we talking about? We are talking about Pass, the formerly known as
See,
the Professional Association for SQL Server, now known as Pass.
well, it's the company, the management company that we actually contract out to do Summit and a lot of work. It's CNC. If you haven't heard, you
Yeah,
can go
okay,
out there
sorry.
and read it.
Yeah, the management company is Christensen and Christensen. They run Pass. So Chris asked, important unrelated question. Where did I get this shirt? I actually got it at a Facebook conference a few years back. Each year they had a conference, developer conference, F8, and went there one year, got the t-shirt. So yeah, okay, the management company. Yes, yes. So the management company, which is colloquially referred to as Pass HQ, and is heavily involved in almost every aspect of the organization. So a split would be a lot of effort, a lot of work, um, a lot of planning, and
Survival, maybe.
maybe I mean that might be what has to happen. Again, I'm not stepping foot on any particular island here.
Well, they wanted 3,600, wasn't it about that, Kevin? That's what they wanted for registrations for past 2020.
That was the goal.
And they ended up with about 1,450 of what I saw.
Yeah. Which
See, I can
a little
say
bit
that
under.
I'm going out for retirement in 3.5 years. So if they want to, if they want to just kind of, you know, kick me out the door, it's like, okay, whatever.
Lots of savings and back to being nonprofit. So from what I've heard, they have never been non-profit. They've always been not for profit, which is different for tax purposes. And it has to do with this what I kind of know the story around it, but I don't know how much I can say publicly. But basically the difference between nonprofit and not for profit. Uh, Nonprofit is things like charitable organizations where you get to write off almost everything, almost all of the stuff. You don't really have to pay taxes. Not for profit is where you have an organization, you still have to pay taxes, although certain states allow you to write off portions of it. And there are a few reasons why you may have to be a not for profit instead of a non-profit. So for us in TriPass, we are a non-profit. We also are a non-revenue pretty much because we also are essentially a non-expense. Not for profit is what I meant. Not speak English good. Well, no, to be honest, um, there aren't that. There's a pretty small percentage of people who can differentiate non-profit from not for profit. They sound the same. And the first time I heard about the difference, I'm like, wait, you're telling me that's a difference? But it all has to do with tax law, and it's about basically a lot of it is based on the income that you can get, like where your income sources come from, who is on your board, how people get onto your board. 501c3 versus a 501c7. Yes, it is a big legal difference. And 501c7 is, I believe, what Pass is running as. Went through entire filing processes and limitations what we're allowed to do as a 501c3. Right, there are definitely limitations. So, for example, as a 501c3, TriPass couldn't say be heavily sponsored by Century One, now owned by SolarWinds. So, if Century One came in and said, we will give you a lot of money and be your primary backer, be your primary sponsor, and we want 2 board seats. And in that case, we would be at serious risk of losing 501c3. Nonprofits have a separate legal entity. Not-for-profits cannot have a separate legal entity. Have to look into that because you can have a not-for-profit that is still incorporated, and that's a 501c7. So, it is a legal entity of its own, but it's about the tax laws and what you're allowed to do. But I am also not a tax accountant, so please don't take any of my advice, otherwise you may end up in jail. That's how things go around here. Speaking of jail, we're having TriPass elections. That seems like a perfectly reasonable segue. So we had our few weeks of time for people to run for the board of directors, and we have a slate of people at this point. So starting on November 19th through December 3rd, I'm going to post a poll on Meetup. Any valid TriPass Meetup member will be allowed to vote. It's just a quick yes, no, up, down vote on the slate of board members because there were no other board members who applied or no other people who wanted to be board members. So basically, it's up or down, vote of confidence. We had one of these when TriPass incorporated, so it's something we've done before. Had there been competition, we would have had a separate process. Nonetheless, November 19th through December 3rd, expect me to annoy you approximately as much as I did when we were doing nominations. And with that, we are going to call it an evening. So thank you everybody in chat. By the way, one thing I did want to call out from Amir. Sorry, I did see this and I didn't even say it out loud. Amir says, Pass did a good job with Summit. I was impressed with their support, asked a lot of questions. This was the first time with a virtual summit, but they did a good job. Yeah, the back end folks, I think they did a good job walking through all of this, making sure that sessions were done on time, that Q&A was handled well. It sounded like it was pretty good. They did a good job. And speaking of good jobs, we are out for the evening. Thank you again, everybody in chat. Hope to see you again next time. Don't forget, tomorrow night, Tracy is going to talk about DBA checks. So check in on those databases, making sure that everything is configured as you want them to be. Tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Come on down to twitch.tv/TriangleSSUG, where you're seeing this tonight. And with that, thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.